Well, I hope this podcast is a source of great encouragement for you and your colleagues, family members. I'm with Paul Myers of Myers House Buyers. I'm Neil Gordon. And how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm going to learn along with everyone else how to grow wealth and retire at the age of 34. Let me shake your hand. I'm just going to see if this will rub off on me. Wow.
There you go.
I know you owe this all to God.
Oh, I definitely do. The Lord has been really gracious to me. I mean, I think about Michigan just beating Ohio State, and
Right.
Jim Harbaugh comes out and says, potentially about Ryan Day, some people wake up on third base and they've hit a triple. I've definitely woken up on third base and acknowledged that, the Lord has been so gracious to me. It goes back to Deuteronomy 8:17 and 18, where it's actually a warning. He's saying, be careful if you think it's your power and the strength of your hands that's produced this wealth for you. But, actually, it says, remember the Lord your God, for it's he who's given you the ability to produce wealth. So that's, to me, the biblical foundation, the biblical warning for being grounded and remembering that we're all just stewards.
Yes, we are. And we're going to work our way through really Paul's 13-year career, ending in retirement where he transitions into building wealth. And there's some nuggets in it for you as well. But share with us a little bit about your upbringing.
Yeah, well, I'm actually a native Augustan. Grew up here, and my folks still live here in town, but graduated from Lakeside High School. I went off to University of Georgia. And while I was in college at Georgia is when my granddad, who was a multimillionaire, really wise with money, he gave me a book my sophomore year of college called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that book, and it talks a lot about how the rich buy assets that produce income. And the difference between an asset and a liability is that an asset puts money in your pocket at the end of every month. And so when I read that, I realized, you know what? I think I probably want to invest in real estate for the rest of my life, because that God just kind of gave me that as a passion.
Fantastic. And again, Paul's website is MyersHouseBuyers.com. And he is available for some speaking, whether it be to a civic group or, it, of course, could be a real estate group if you're a broker or if you happen to be involved heavily in real estate and like to have him come and speak. He'll certainly be happy to do that for you as well. We're going to head back to the time when I guess you've met your bride, right?
Yeah.
How did the marriage start out financially?
Broken in love, right?
Okay.
Yeah, we got married in summer of 2007. I had no inherited wealth, so nor do I now, for that matter. But you get married, we graduated college debt free, right? So we had that going for us. We didn't have any car loans or credit card debt, anything like that. But she had decided to pursue medical school here at MCG, was what it was called at the time, right?
Sure.
And then, so 4 years later, essentially, we looked down, and not only I had worked, so we at least had our living expenses covered, but we had to borrow still $100,000 in student loans.
Wow.
To get through that.
And you got some real life experience in real estate with the home that you and your wife lived in as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We bought that home, and we still own that home today. Right?
Okay.
It's one of our rentals. And
was it a good deal? As you look back on it now?
Not really, because we bought it in 2007, which is the height of where things were moving in real estate. And so if we had waited a couple of years during to the recession, in end of 2008 to 2013, we would have been a lot better off. But real estate, one of the great things about real estate as an asset class is it's very forgiving. So if you give it time, if you get a renter in there to cover the mortgage and the tax and insurance, you can oftentimes, even if you buy at the height, you can recover if you just wait. So
Sure.
Now that property is one of our best rentals because we've got, a 2.75% interest rate on it. We signed a 5-year lease with a new tenant, which is pretty rare to do in residential real estate. So it's cash flowing and should have it paid off in a few years.
I've always said everyone should have not only a mentor or two, but your own board of directors, if you can,
Yeah.
someone to just bounce things off of. For me, we spoke off camera. Jeff Annis is one of my mentors. Derek May, who worked for decades with Morris Communications. Who was your mentor just after you and your wife started off a little bit broke?
Yeah. Well, I had a mentor, and I basically shadowed him at nights. So he had a Suburban with a big trailer behind it that had all the little plumbing part, PVC connections and anything you could need. And I would drive from my house over to his house and get in the Suburban with him. And we would drive all across Columbia County and South Augusta and everywhere where he had rentals. And he did all of his own maintenance.
Wow.
So we were essentially going on calls for maintenance requests and meeting tenants. And I would ask my mentor, okay, how did you find this house? And what did you pay for? And what do you rent it for? And it was over that process of 2 years that essentially I realized this guy is a mega millionaire, and he's clearly done things the right way. How can I model that so that I don't have to reinvent the wheel?
If you could equate that to money, what is it worth to have a mentor, do you think? How many times your dollar? Yeah.
I tell people when they're looking to invest in mentorship, they need to try and 10x their return. So if you're going to spend $10,000 or $20,000, you really need to expect a return of $100,000 or $200,000. But it's hard to put a value on it, because how can you quantitatively say the mistakes that you're able to avoid? How can you quantify those into a dollar amount? It's hard to do.
That's true, but there's so many good business coaches out there, and there's Vistage and TAB, CSRA, the alternative board. So I always recommend that too. That's fantastic.
And I'll interrupt you too.
Yeah.
When I started Myers House Buyers, I basically convened a formal board of advisors. I haven't mentioned that to you yet, but so I've got 6 guys that come in once a quarter, and they look at all the financials. They look at all the business decisions I'm making. They look at all the HR and personnel decisions I'm considering, the marketing channels we're looking at, and they're evaluating, giving me a second set of eyes to say, Paul, you're off here, you're off there, and their job is essentially hold me accountable to making wise decisions. 7
heads are better than one.
That's right.
Isn't that true?
Absolutely.
So that was in 2008 that you did the ride-alongs with your mentor. Then we hit 2019 and VA foreclosures.
2009, yes.
Or 2009, rather.
Yeah, the recession, and this is kind of one of the ways I woke up on third base, right? Is because the recession hits in Q3 of 2008, and I look around, and all these houses are totally on sale, right? It was the biggest sale in real estate probably for several decades, maybe since the late 1980s, right? When the Resolution Trust Corporation was created. So I looked around and I saw all these properties, and I looked at my mentor and I said, is this really happening? Is this what I was reading all those books and training for? And he said, yes, this is your time. Do your thing. So I kind of happened into it, honestly, with the first VA foreclosure, because it was just a property I was looking at off Old Petersburg Road in Petersburg Village. And I went to make an offer, and the listing agent, who was going to double their commission because I was making the offer through him, he looked at me and said, well, why don't you just get VA Vindy financing? And I said, well, what's that? They said, well, the federal government will lend you money to buy their foreclosures. And all you have to do is put down 5%, not 20%, which is a big difference when you're starting. You can have as many mortgages as you want. There's no appraisal necessary, and you don't have to pay PMI, which is primary mortgage insurance.
Right.
So when I heard all those stipulations, I said, yes, please sign me up. I'll take the VA Vindy financing.
Yeah. Well, that was your first entree, I suppose, into real important real estate. And then your career started to take off.
Yeah.
And you worked for a great Christian man, Randy Hatcher.
That's right.
MAU, the CEO. What was that experience like?
It was wonderful. Best company I've ever worked for. And it's not even close.
Yeah.
Randy's just a great leader. He's been at it a long time. He really taught me a lot of things back then that I didn't realize I would need till now that I own my own company. Right. So in terms of business ownership and servant leadership, Randy was a 10 out of 10. So for me to kind of just, I think back, getting a handwritten note from him as I was on the sales team, several rungs underneath him, that said, "Great job, Paul. You're doing well. The cream always rises to the top."
Wow.
You're getting those handwritten letters from him. I remember how I felt, and it makes me now want to lead others the way I was once led.
Right.
So that's how I'd answer that.
I remember years ago doing a business story on MAU because he would sponsor employees and their spouses to go to a weekend to remember marriage retreat.
Yes.
Like nobody does that. Nobody cares that much. So that's when you can find an employer like that, that's terrific.
In fact, we were beneficiaries of that because we attended.
Great.
He paid for both the conference and all the lodging. So yeah, extremely generous. So much to learn in terms of generosity too.
And speaking of your wife, a few years later in 2013, I understand you both got laryngitis somehow. Was screaming? Was there was a scream involved?
That's
somehow?
right. Yeah, we did eventually, over about a 3-year time period, pay off her medical school student loans. So we were so excited about that. We wanted it to kind of be a landmark moment where we drew a line in the sand. And so we cemented that by driving up to Nashville, going on Dave Ramsey's radio show, and doing a live debt-free scream.
Wow. That's great.
It was a lot of fun.
That's really neat. And then for many years, you continued in your career, MAU and so forth, with a 6-figure income, which is tremendous money in the CSRA, and continued tithing and doing all the right things. And then you came across, now this is only going back a few years, a 40-unit apartment complex.
Yeah.
What happened next after it was discovered?
Yeah. It was just significantly distressed. And that's really kind of my calling card, is just finding undervalued opportunities or distressed property. And the property was owned by a landlord in New York who was losing it in foreclosure to a bank in California. So 2 extremely far out locations as compared to Augusta. And it had been significantly mismanaged by a manager that was kind of living in a unit and freeloading a little bit. And so ultimately got in touch with the bank from California and negotiated with them directly to buy it. And ultimately the property needed a significant renovation, and it took 6 to 12 months to both renovate and then to release and bring the property up to full occupancy.
And you learned some collaboration with some other and things
had to learn how to work with commercial agents, how to learn how to work with a bank that has an asset they don't want, that's in receivership, that they want to get rid of. I also had an opportunity to raise private money from individuals that, high net worth individuals that wanted to get a good return on their money. So I think that's a great progression for a lot of initial real estate investors out there that want money. They need money to fund their deals. How do you go talk to someone whose net worth is $5, $10, $15 million to borrow $100,000? What are they looking for? So it was definitely a great learning experience. And one of the things, I'll go back to my time at MAU that I really learned that helped me with that deal in particular is I learned how to sell. And MAU, another way Randy was generous to me, was the company paid for me to attend sales training, professional sales training from an organization called Sandler Sales Training.
Oh, yeah.
And through that was probably one of the biggest contributors to my increase in income, was just learning how to interact with people and how to sell and how to have a system and how to sell within that system and interact with prospects and things like that.
Was this Eddie Huff?
It was Eddie. Absolutely.
Great trainer.
Absolutely.
And I know he's transitioned into more of hiring company, I believe, but Sandler still exists. So if you want to look him up, it's still here in the CSRA.
It is. Yeah, the local, Eddie sold it to another new franchisee named Victor Lacey.
Excellent. Oh, that's fantastic. So after the 40-unit apartment complex, she said, "This is my vocation," right? You retired from being an employee and
that's right,
and
having a W-2, being a W-2er, if you will. I had done that for 13 years.
Right.
So at that point, I pretty much decided it didn't have anything to do with the apartment complex per se,
right?
But it had to do with all of my rentals appreciating and feeling like we had pulled the boat close to the dock. That's a phrase I like to use a lot.
Right.
And at that point, why not go ahead and strike out on my own and really kind of do some of the things with Myers House Buyers that I've done. So yeah.
And so then you began, as you alluded to earlier, you began to hire mentors and you began to build your business.
Yeah, that's right.
And then that transitioned into very unique marketing campaigns that you still have to this day.
That's
which
right.
I think share a little bit with our audience. It's pretty fascinating.
So ultimately, within Myers House Buyers, what we do is we look for motivated sellers at the end of the day. I mean, that's what it all boils down to. If the simplistic summary of football is blocking and tackling, the simplistic overview of what Myers House Buyers is we find motivated sellers. Mm-hmm. And that could be lots of different ways. I mean, we look at on-market and off-market deals. On-market would be traditionally listed properties with agents on the MLS. Mm-hmm. And then off-markets could be anything from for sale by owners. It could be driving for dollars is what it's oftentimes referred to, but having someone on staff, which we do, that drives in neighborhoods. And we've mapped out the whole CSRA of 222 subdivisions and 406 streets.
Wow.
And we're driving those neighborhoods, right? We look for 20 different signs of distress. It could be a tarp on a roof. It could be an overflowing mailbox or garage. It could be uncut shrubs or overgrown grass. So there's lots of different types of physical distress of property.
Sort of a little bit of the low-hanging fruit in the real estate world.
That's right.
I suppose.
That's right. Except a lot of people, it takes work to go out and find the deals, right? And that's a lot of people don't want to put in that work. So, yeah, I mean, it's that, and then there's so many other ways to find deals, right? There's code violations from the county. There's probate. I could talk for an hour just about finding deals. So
if you get a postcard in the mail and it has the picture of your home, don't be alarmed. You're not being invaded. There's an opportunity.
That's right.
Is that right?
That's right.
How does that work with the postcards?
Well, we send about over 20,000 postcards a month.
Wow.
So it's a significant investment. We spend over $10,000 just on postcards. And, people complain a lot about the postcards. And I tell you, I would love to not spend that money on postcards, but it just keeps working.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, we just keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I never woke up and said, "Hey, I want to spend $10,000 a month mailing 20,000 postcards." That's not like nobody wakes up thinking that, but it does, elicit a significant response. Now the response is extremely low; it's 0.5% to 1%, but it does, seem to be effective.
Well, here's an easier way, I suppose. Paul's website is myershousebuyers.com, and it's really set up both for folks who would like to sell their home and earn money right away, or investors as well that might like in on a really good deal. And you have a pretty unique way of contacting investors. Is that right? Each month?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So if a seller wants to sell, they can just reach out to us, and we've got a team that will answer. I have a lady that works for me virtually that answers all inbound phone calls, right? Mm-hmm. And she'll ask some questions about the house and get an understanding of the seller. And then I have another gentleman that will go on all of our appointments with homeowners, take a look at the home, figure out what in terms of if it's a fit and if we can make them a cash offer. And those offers are typically pretty simple. There's no closing costs. We pay for those. There's no commissions associated with the sale. Mm-hmm. And the seller gets to pick the closing date. So that's essentially how it boils down for a seller. And then for people that are looking to buy homes, we do some of our deals we close, and I might keep them as a rental, or we might flip them, or we might pay cash for them and put them back on the MLS. There's lots of different strategies that we use to maximize profit, which is ultimately our job as real estate investors. Sure. But we also do assign some of our deals to other cash buyers. So we do have a list of cash buyers of about 1,700 people that are flippers and landlords. Mm-hmm. And they've said, hey, I want to make money through fixing and flipping, or I want to make money through buying and holding rentals. Right. And so if someone wants to be on our list, they can just reach out to us, and they can send a guy on my staff an email, or they can fill out contact information on our website. Sure. And connect with us there. And that's myershousebuyers.com. Yep. And we're going to
get involved a little bit more in the investment side coming up. But before we do so, so this is the first time you've been in this studio.
Yes.
I think you were in a different downtown Augusta studio with Augusta Podcast before.
Yeah.
What are your impressions?
Man, I love it. It's such a cool studio. It's a great step up. So kudos to David Bash and Chris Nabholz and all the work they've done. It's cool to see how their company's grown and the number of podcasts they're now handling in Augusta.
That's right.
I think it's over 20 now.
That's right.
So it's just a cool atmosphere.
Well, and we have a screen up to share with you some information. You can go to AugustaPodcasts.com, and they're also very heavily involved in LinkedIn and also a YouTube channel. So you may want to check that out. You may get some ideas as well. Well, we want to continue with Paul Myers of MyersHouseBuyers.com, and I suppose the acronym for this particular segment is REI. Now, I'm an old guy. I remember REO, Speedwagon, but what's REI? Remember that?
REI is just a short acronym for real estate investing.
Okay.
Right. And every investor or person that wants to get into real estate investing really would benefit from doing an inventory of themselves and thinking and asking the questions, okay, what time do I have available to dedicate to this? What cash do I have available? And if I don't have cash, who do I know that could lend me cash? What's my credit look like? What's my debt to income ratio? Have I met with a mortgage broker and gotten a pre-qualification letter? Do I want to start with rentals, or do I want to start with fix and flips or wholesaling? There's a lot of different ways that people can get started in real estate investing. But the best way to figure out what is going to be a good fit for you is just doing a self-assessment or an inventory of your strengths.
Outstanding. And we'll get to some of the specifics on that. But you mentioned flipping. Those reality shows have really taken off on cable over the last decade, I would say.
Yeah.
Do you think those are a little bit fabricated for television, or do you feel that they are realistic and those success stories do happen?
I think it's both, right? They're making it for TV, so they're adding in the drama, but I don't think they're fudging the numbers. I mean, I think it's very easy on flips to really make $20,000 to $50,000 if you do them the right way, and if you're targeting the right owner-occupant buyer, and you're partnering with real estate agents to understand what fair market value is, and even paying real estate agents for design fees or hiring a designer, so you're making sure that your interior design is on point.
Right. Excellent. Well, back to the numbers here with the self-assessment. Do you recommend generating your own cash, or maybe going to a private lender to get started?
Well, if I could have done things differently 15 years ago, what I would have done is found a private money lender, because if you're just using your own cash, that's obviously a finite resource. And ultimately, for the first 10 years I was investing, all I could do was get a conventional mortgage and make a down payment. So I didn't have access, and that might only account for 10 or 20% of the deals in the market. If you want access to 100% of the deals in the whole pie, you need to be able to pay cash for homes. And that's what we do now, is right. We offer cash for homes. That opens you up to really any deal, regardless of the condition of the property. Whereas if you're just all you can do is a conventional mortgage, that's going to really limit the types of deals you can do.
Gotcha. So in theory, other people's money, meaning borrowing and such. But by the way, the website is MyersHouseBuyers.com to learn about a cash sale of your home, or in fact, if you would like to invest, you can get on Paul's email list.
Yeah.
How about credit scores? They say if you're trying to just buy your own home for your family, they like about 600, 650-ish. Is that similar for investors?
Yeah, I think that's fair. Typically for what's called a non-owner occupied mortgage, you're going to pay 0.5% to a full % above whatever typical rates are. So if you could get a 15-year fixed rate on your home for 2.5% today, If you're buying a rental property, you'd probably be at 3.5%. But yeah, 600, 650, 700. The mortgage brokers have tiers, and the higher your score, the better a tier you're going to be in to qualify for a par rate. But if your score starts dropping down, you could still probably get a conventional mortgage, but you're going to get hit with a 1/4 point or a 1/2 point that you're going to have to pay at closing.
Gotcha. Well, some people who get involved in investing are really handy people, and they like to get the hammer and the nails out there. And some folks are wheeler dealers, and they just make deals. What's best, or what are your thoughts about skill sets?
To each his own, right? I've never been that handy of a person. Like for me, I've always been kind of a deal junkie and really enjoyed the thrill of putting together a deal, negotiating the price, putting together the financing, raising the private money, which maybe covers the down payment, or maybe that covers the renovation budget. But that just wasn't a strength for me. So I had to rely on, when I first started buying in 2009 and 10, it was, how can I find a deal that just needs the paint and the carpet? And I know I can sub those out and still work my 9 to 5 and maybe just pay some subs to do that kind of stuff. So I think if you've got a 9 to 5, it's going to be harder for you to really get on site and do a lot of the work. But if you're handy, I mean, there's a lot of things that opens up to you, right? You don't have to pay for a lot of the maintenance that you typically would. You can even take on property management and leasing if you wanted to as well, to save from having to pay a property manager.
What is criteria, and how might criteria help you?
Criteria is everything when it comes to figuring out what you want and finding it. If you don't take the time to identify exactly what you want, not only will you not be able to identify it for yourself, but real estate agents and other people in your sphere of influence won't know what a deal is for you because you haven't clearly defined it for them.
Gotcha.
So every investor should sit down and say, and investors come to me all the time and they say, well, send me a deal, right? Just send me a deal. Well, what zip code do you want to be in? How much of a renovation are you comfortable with? Are you comfortable with a $5,000 or $10,000 paint and carpet light, cosmetic renovation? Or are you open to a heavier renovation that includes kitchen and baths? Or are you open to a renovation that's down to the studs that, needs everything, or maybe a burnout? Those are different levels of rehab that different investors are comfortable with. So knowing where, knowing what, and then I would be even more specific on the where. Like, tell real estate agents, I have a whole written out criteria. It's a 1-page Word document, and I've sent it to probably hundreds of real estate agents over the last 10, 15 years. Have that ready to go. So if you're checking out at Lowe's and you meet a real estate agent, you can say, hey, when I get back to my office, I'm going to email you my criteria. What's a deal for me? If you ever come across something like that, please let me know, and I'd be happy to take a look at it quickly and make an offer. And I could,
time is money, huh?
That's right. I mean, I still like to tell the story of a townhome over behind Giuseppe's on off Wheeler Road.
Right.
And I had met a real estate agent a year earlier, and she just saved me in her phone as investor. And then she had a client that wanted to sell this property. She called me and 3 other investors, and the only reason she called me was because I had sent her my criteria, and the deal wasn't even in my criteria. I wanted 3-2 brick ranches in Martinez off Columbia Road, and she sent me a townhome off Wheeler Road. But sure enough, it was such a good deal. She said they wanted $75 for it, and I offered them $75. I put it under contract, and there was already a tenant in the property. I bought it for $75,000, paid cash. And then a couple of years later, I ended up selling it for $120,000.
Wow.
All because I was ready with my criteria. I clearly communicated it to her. She thought of me in her mind as an investor.
Right.
And then when she had a deal, then she reached back out to me, and I was top of mind.
I'm not a mathematician, but kids, that's $45,000 right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus the equity you built up over the few years, right?
Yeah. And again, the moral story is know what a deal is for you so that you can communicate that to other people. Then you can, encompass their help to aid you in finding what you're looking for.
What kind of marketing advice would you give to investors?
Well, there are inexpensive ways to start marketing, and then there are more expensive ways. The inexpensive way is typically more time intensive, right? It's driving for dollars, which just costs you your gas, right? And then getting those addresses and skip tracing them and finding out people's phone numbers and then texting them. You can send texts for under a penny a text,
Right.
or you can send ringless voicemails for 12 cents a ringless voicemail. And those are pretty inexpensive ways of actually contacting people. When you start getting into mailing, that's when you're going to pay 50 cents a postcard or $1 for a letter. Right. And if someone is just starting out, do what I did. Handwrite. Create a professional template, you know, in Microsoft Word with your letter. Print it off, hand sign it, stuff it in an envelope yourself, and don't pay on. So we pay an outside vendor all that money because they're doing all the prep, and we use their templates. But when you're starting off, just do all that yourself, and you can save a significant amount of money.
Outstanding. So that's kind of the marketing aspect of it. Again, Paul's website is MyersHouseBuyers.com, MyersHouseBuyers.com. Lots of resources on there as well. Talk a little bit about the deal analysis.
Yeah. Gosh, most of it is just I've borrowed from Gary Keller, who's the founder of Keller Williams Realty.
Right.
And he's written several amazing books. He's written The Millionaire Real Estate Investor, Hold, Shift. There's several great books that I'd recommend. But he has, I've adopted many years ago, just 2 Excel spreadsheets. One is called the Buy and Sell Terms Worksheet. One is called the Buy and Hold Terms Worksheet. And I've used those really simply to analyze properties I want to buy to flip and to analyze properties I want to buy and hold as rentals. So as you can imagine, analyzing a flip is a lot different. You're looking at what's your cost to purchase the home, what's your cost to renovate the home, what's your cost to sell the home, and what's your cost to hold it while you're doing all of that. So it takes those 4 areas so that you don't overlook anything, and then tells you what you could pay for the home, right? The buy and hold analysis, if you're looking at buying a rental, is more cash flow oriented, and it looks at a sample month, and it says, if you pay X for the property and you got a mortgage for 80% at this interest rate over this term, whether it's 15 or 30 years, what could be your rent that you could get, and then your maintenance and your vacancy and your taxes and insurance and your principal and interest? What are all those expenses, and what would be your remaining net cash flow? So there are 2 different ways to analyze deals depending on whether you're flipping or renting.
So, Paul, they say that cash is king in general. Is it the same in the real estate business?
Absolutely. If you can pay cash for a house, you're not going to be competing against financed offers, right? And you can allow your offer to not be contingent on an appraisal or financing. So the seller really appreciates that. They look at that as superior to other offers. And yeah, it's huge.
You speak of the 10, 50, 40 rule, and how has that worked in your life, and do you advise it for others?
Absolutely. Yeah, the 10-50-40 rule is just simply tithing 10%, living off of 40% of what you make, and then investing 50%. And other people could get more aggressive than that or less aggressive. It just depends on what you and your spouse or your household feel like you can accomplish. But that was a huge contributor to our success, because my entire career, we were always living off as little as we could so that we could have as much as we could to invest. So live on a budget, find out how much you can clear beyond your budget and then put that into a sacred savings account and consider that your initial investment capital. And that can be what you use to fund, your down payment on your first rental, maybe the renovation costs on the rental or the closing costs.
So that's, of course, that's your own money, the sort of the cash way. Where else might you find money in more traditional ways to be able to still invest and have multiple properties?
Yeah. Well, you can always partner with a mortgage broker, and typically they're going to want you to put 20 to 25% down. But everyone should, at least, if you have a W-2 income, right, and you have decent credit, you should sit down with a mortgage broker and get pre-approved and figure out what you can qualify for. because that type of debt is going to be 15 or 30 years. It's a fixed rate, so the rate can never change, and the payment's always going to be the same, right? So that's kind of the gold standard. If you're looking to buy a rental, of course, your financing has to match your exit strategy. So rentals, conventional financing. But if you're looking for flips, you probably want to find a private money lender. And that's somebody who, they've got a high net worth. It could be $3 to $10 million, but they're comfortable lending you $100,000. It's not going to change their world. Maybe they believe in you, or maybe they just want to make a good return. Maybe they want to make 6 to 12% on their money. And you can provide them that if you can get in and do a flip. Paying that amount of interest, for 6 or 12 months is really not much in the grand scheme of things if you're going to make $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. So the other things I'd say too is, if you equity lines of credit are a great way to have liquidity, which I've used to be able to pay cash for homes. And then if you have a bunch of rental properties that you have significant equity in, you could always put a blanket mortgage on some of those to either get equity out within reason, with conservative leverage, or if you want to put those on a longer term fixed rate mortgage, like a blanket mortgage, you can do that, which if you're wanting to keep them for a long term as a rental is good.
Sure. So if someone signs up as an investor to be on your email list at myershouseBuyers.com, and they find something they like, they make an offer, you say yes, how quickly might they close? Would you be at the closing table?
We typically close within a week or two.
Wow.
Yeah, we're positioning a lot of those opportunities as strictly for cash buyers only.
Sure.
So if we have a walkthrough at a house, and then someone submits a winning bid, and we typically let them know within 24 hours, hey, you won the property and you're going to need to close in cash within a week. So yeah, absolutely. If you can pay cash for homes, it would open you up to all of our deals. Like I said earlier, you move the pie from being able to look at maybe 5 or 10% of homes on the market to 100% of any deal if you can pay cash for it.
So they close, but the property is as is.
Yeah.
What do they do?
Well, it depends on whether it's a flip or a rental and what your exit strategy is, right? If it's a rental, you want to, put together your kind of bare minimum scope of work to be able to get the property rent ready. And depends on where the property is to the types of finishes you're going to use. And that could be something you could consult, maybe a real estate agent on. But on a flip, you definitely might want to consult a real estate agent or a design expert to figure out what kind of finishes you're going to go with for the kitchen or for the baths or whatnot. But if it's a flip, you need to, hopefully during the due diligence period, you would have used a general contractor or gotten inspections, and you ultimately need to create a scope of work of everything you want to do to the property, buy room in the house. And then after you've closed, you put the lockbox on the door, and it's up to you to get your subs in or your general contractor in and get the project rolling.
I thought we'd take a moment and look at 2 case studies of deals. 3302 McDonald Street. Where is that in Augusta?
It is. Do you know where the Wife Saver is on Washington Road? It's right behind that.
Yes, Martinez. Is that right?
That's right.
Kind of
right on the border.
On
there.
the border, yeah, sure. Okay, yeah, one of the side streets that run near there. And how did that deal go?
It was a property that I actually personally drove by. Which is kind of unique because I have someone doing driving now, but I personally drove by and saw the property, and it looked actually really nice. The property didn't have any signs of distress whatsoever. In fact, it looked like it had just been pressure washed. But I thought to myself, the location's amazing and it's a duplex. So why not just send them a postcard, right? Why not?
Yeah.
So I did just that, right? I sent them a letter, and the moment the gentleman who owned it got the letter, he called me immediately. And just met him over at the house, and the right side was occupied, but the left wasn't. So went and took a look at the inside of the left side of the duplex, and we ended up negotiating a price right there on the spot. I think he wanted 90 or so, and I thought it was a really good deal. And I ended up offering him, I forget what I initially offered him, but we ended up agreeing at $82,000, and we did the contract right there on my hood of my car. And I ended up paying cash for that property. I used an equity line to pay cash for it. And I ended up investing about $10,000 to renovate it. So that was pretty cosmetic. I did paint, I did carpet, a little bit of updates to the bathrooms.
Did you rent it out?
A few other things. I did end up renting the left side out. So I rented the left side out for $875, and the right side was already leased for $575. So I ultimately bought it for $82. I put 10 into it. It was into it for $92,000.
Yeah.
It appraised for $145,000.
Wow.
So I had about $50,000 in equity, roughly. And then I did a refinance, which a lot of people now call this the Bur Method, which is BRRRR. It simply stands for if you buy something, then you renovate it, then you rent it out, then you refinance it, then you repeat.
Wow.
And it's kind of a way to essentially use cash to buy homes, but then get all your cash back. So then you're locked and loaded for the next deal.
Right.
So I did Bur that home. I ended up borrowing back out what I had in it. So essentially at the end of the day, I had the duplex. I owed what I had in it, which was 95 or 100 roughly. If you add in the closing costs into my renovation budget and my purchase. And then the property was cash flowing. My mortgage payments around $700-800. And so I had the equity, I had the cash flow, and that's kind of your ideal, perfect deal.
Wonderful. And the last one, which was a flip at 1001 Eustis Drive. That is so familiar, that address. Not the specific address, but the area.
Yeah, that's in Bedford Heights off of Washington Road, next to National Hills.
Okay.
Really close to Lake Almond, right down there.
Yes.
Yep.
Oh, kind
That's
of
right.
around that bend and...
That's right. Right before you get on Calhoun, it's over there to the left.
If you're
heading east on Washington Road.
Sure. That's a hidden jewel back there, because you're right. The lake is right there.
If you wanted to turn it into like a VRBO / master's rental, it's just the perfect area.
Yeah.
You couldn't drop a home into a better place in Augusta. I'm not an Airbnb, VRBO, special event income guy. That's not my focus.
Right.
I'm more of a long-term 12-month lease, approach. But I just think that was an interesting property, because I've had so many people since I bought it say to me, oh, I'm familiar with that house, or I saw that when it was on market. And this is a deal I bought this year in January, and it was an on-market deal. So for all the investors out there that are saying you can't find deals on market, and I know it's a hot market, by the way, I get that. That deal was publicly listed with a bank REO agent. Anyone could have bought that. They had it listed for like 105 or 115 or something.
Sounds light to me.
It was low. It was pretty low, but the home went under contract probably 3 or 4 times. It kept falling out, and every time it fell out, the bank that owned it cut the price another $10,000. So I think by the time they cut it down to around 95, I think I bought it. I made an offer and got it accepted around 85.
Wow.
So it's just a great reminder that there's so many opportunities, even on market in today's hot market, to find deals that are, overlooked by other people. Outstanding.
Well, once again, if you have interest in investing and you want to get on Paul's email list, there's 1,700. Now, they're not all investors. Some are real estate agents. Is that right?
Some are real estate agents, yes.
1,700 on your list of people that are really interested and excited about this process. Just go to MyersHouseBuyers.com, and there's an easy way for you to get on the email list.
Yeah.
I wanted to give a shout out to AugustaPodcasts.com. You can go to their site as well. And if you're a business and you want to get involved and do podcasts and share information, or if you just have a hobby and you'd like to kind of have a sense of being on the radio, if you will, just go to their website or check out some of their segments on the various social media channels. Paul, thank you so much for the time.
Absolutely. And if anyone wants to reach me, I'm happy to offer my personal cell phone, which is 706-294-7343. I'm always available if someone wants to just reach out to me and touch base. Or if they want to get on our cash buyer list, they can also email Reeves, which is spelled Reeves, Reeves at MyersHouseBuyers.com. And Reeves is one of our team members. He can add them onto our cash. We do need their email and phone number. And then Reeves will reach back out to them and ask them what is their criteria. And he has about 9 or 10 questions, so ask them to kind of figure that out. So
why am I not surprised? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Neil.
You
Appreciate
got
it.
Well, hi there. I'm certainly excited about this podcast. If you are in the real estate industry, you are in for a treat because we're going to try to ring the cash register with Paul Myers of MyersHouseBuyers.com. How are you, Paul?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, life is about word of mouth and referral business. And I'm guessing the way that you're able to buy homes for cash and sell homes for cash, the real estate agents are involved often.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're a huge part of what we do. And I try and maintain as many relationships with real estate agents as I can. And I've done that for 15 years now because ultimately real estate agents are professionals. They're worth every bit of the money they earn, and they are the gatekeepers oftentimes to that distressed property or that distressed seller.
Sure. And you mentioned they're worth every penny. Of course, half of the deal is usually about 3%.
Sure.
Is that fair?
That's right.
It could vary a little bit.
Absolutely.
You have a way to double that. To 6%.
Absolutely.
Are you listening now? How so?
I mean, if you're an investor, it's very important to make sure that real estate agents know that you're unrepresented. And so typically when I'm calling a real estate agent, I always start off and let them know, hey, would you mind writing my offer? I'm not represented by an agent. And that means that the listing agent, when you're calling the listing agent directly, who's going to get 3%, can now get 6%,
right?
Because they can write your offer and represent you as a buyer, which then becomes dual agency. So if an agent can be a dual agent, they can essentially go from making 3% to 6%. So in the last 15 years, I've only written one offer.
Wow.
And I've gotten a commission on writing my own offer one time because to me, I would rather support and let that agent work both sides of it.
Well, let's try to run through some real life examples. One out in Columbia County involved the dreaded mold.
Yeah,
absolutely. Remember that one?
Absolutely. That was a deal that I bought earlier this year. Again, a real estate agent called me directly, and she knew that by doing that, she would be able to work both sides of the deal. And so ultimately, I paid cash for that home. And when I did, instead of her making 3% on $160,000, she made 6% on $160,000. And a lot of people just refer to it as the double dip technique, but ultimately it's a phenomenal way to support agents and allow them to make a larger income.
And I'm guessing they don't want to associate mold with their good name. That was part of it. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a real estate agent, I was at the dentist, and the real estate agent was point blank told me, I don't want to be associated with, and it wasn't that particular, it was a different one and a different agent. But she said to me, I don't want my reputation to be associated with this distressed property. In other words, it was too ugly to list. And that's oftentimes what I tell agents. You got anything that's too ugly to list, just give us a call. We're local. Within 24 hours, we'll go out and look at it. And if we can make a cash offer, we'll typically 9 times out of 10, we'll almost always make an offer if we're going to invest the time to go out. And if it works for the seller, great. And you can make double the commission because you'll write our offer. Or if it doesn't, no problem at all. No harm done. At least that seller has a cash offer, even if it's a lowball offer. And sometimes our offers are lowball, sometimes they're not, but at least they've got a kind of a floor that they know they could sell it for. And a lot of times listing agents are dealing with sellers that want way too much. If they get a really low offer, it might be the first step towards that real estate agent being able to convince their seller to do a price reduction.
And I'm sure agents have challenges with financing. And that's another sort of real life example.
Absolutely. Yeah. That property, that example with the mold, Other agents aren't going to want to bring their clients in because it's a health risk, right? To walk through a mold infested property. Additionally, any property that has a need of more than $20,000 or $30,000 in renovation, it's not going to qualify for conventional financing. It's going to fall outside of Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac underwriting guidelines. So a lot of properties, just by the nature of the amount of distress they have, they're just going to be better suited to be sold for cash to an investor.
Well, if you'd like to develop a referral relationship with Paul, you may just want to go, first of all, to the website at MyersHouseBuyers.com. Lots of good resources. You'll kind of get to learn a little bit more about Paul's story and see if you'd like to pick up the phone and get the ball rolling, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. If any real estate agent wants to reach me directly, my cell phone is 706-294-7343, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with them if they've got a deal. Additionally, I do speaking engagements at local real estate brokerages. I've done several just in the last year or two at Keller Williams and Maybaum. So if any brokerage wants to have me come in, we typically talk about three different things, either my story or real estate investing 101, or we'll talk about wholesaling.
And before we scoot, though, let's just share a few other things. Sometimes you encounter a lot of sellers that want a retail buyer. So how can you help in that situation?
Yeah, if we do so much advertising. I mean, I mentioned we send 22,000 postcards a month, and we spend over $10,000 to do that. Oftentimes we'll unearth a seller that wants retail. And when that's the case, we're not going to be able to pay them what they want because we have to be able to buy at a discount to make a profit. And so we typically will refer that seller, hey, if you want retail, I would recommend you see a real estate agent because they can put your home on the MLS and see if you can get retail for it. So we'll refer those opportunities out to real estate agents directly.
And that's, that's part of that referral relationship.
That's right.
In this case, you're providing leads to the real estate agent, and sometimes it works in reverse, rather.
That's right.
How many of these homes do you purchase and put out there for investors or realtors to sort of look at per month?
We're probably in the 5 to 10 homes a month range that we send out. So if someone does get on our email list, that's about the volume they can expect. Of course, we have homes, we have occasional raw land, we have mobile homes, we have brick ranches, and we market to a 15 zip code area throughout the CSRA, anywhere from Harlem, Grovetown, Evans, Martinez, over to Aiken and North Augusta and Belvedere and Clearwater, and into South Augusta and Hepzibah. So that's the geographic orientation of where our deals are going to be.
Do some agents, would you say, work with investors as well? And then how would the referral relationship work in that situation?
Yeah, agents bring us deals all the time. And again, they can double dip on the transaction if they bring it to us directly. If they have a pocket listing or they're about to list a property, and they want an idea of what it might bring if they were to put it on the open market, then sometimes we'll work with them beforehand and make them an offer directly.
For a buy-side commission.
The buy-side commission, yeah. That way they can get both the sell-side and the buy-side commission.
Right. Outstanding. Well, it's great to chat, and to reiterate what Paul mentioned, hey, if you'd like to kind of have a keynote speaker to kick off your sales meeting, because I know good real estate companies try to get together every now and then.
Absolutely.
And I know your experiences have always been great and welcoming.
Yeah, it's great. We've been able to talk at the Keller Williams in Augusta and Aiken and several times at Maybaum. So it just depends on what someone wants to encourage. If they want to encourage their agents and educate them on how best to work with investors for when they have investor clients, I think that's a big benefit to agents, right? All agents, you know how we have a 1,700 person cash buyer list?
Yeah.
Every real estate agent should have an investor list, a Rolodex of, even if it's just 3 to 5 cash buyer investors. We hope that Myers House Buyers is that for the real estate agents out there, but we also know there's tons of other investors. So I always encourage agents to figure out how to work with investors and speak their language and learn how they analyze deals, so that you can take them something that's a fit for them and then it matches their financial criteria for what they consider a deal, and then they can make 6% instead of 3%. Why not?
Double dipping.
It makes perfect sense. And really, I learned that by accident back in the recession in 2009 and 10 and 11. I started calling bank-owned listing agents directly, and somehow them making twice as much money made my offers get accepted more often.
Imagine that. Hey, once again, the phone number and the website up on the screen. Paul Myers, MyersHouseBuyers.com. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Neil.